done. Go.
Awesome. Well, yeah, welcome everyone. As James said, welcome to 2021. These are 5 things that we're keeping our eye on for going into the year, but obviously we could list hundreds if we had time. So we'll cover these and then we'll hopefully have a nice discussion and answer any questions you guys have as best we can. So just a quick introduction to Pixability. We work, I see some of you out there that we work with, but for those of you that we don't work with, we're a YouTube and CTV software and services company. We were founded a little over 10 years ago out of MIT, very focused on how to use data science to better your impact on YouTube. The second thing that we remind people of is that Google has this great YouTube measurement program now. We're part of that. There are 7 companies that are all dubbed by YouTube as being third parties that you should work with on brand suitability and contextual targeting. We're the only one of those that also is certified for YouTube Content Insights. So a lot of people think of us as the sort of data nerds of YouTube. And then the final thing is just we're really working a lot with brands that want to drive more than just impressions on YouTube and CTV. We're really helping people try to get lower in the funnel as possible. So these are our focuses and some of the things that I'll talk about in the presentation here. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about the 5 things that we kind of, Laura and I and a few others of us here at Pixability are keeping our eye on that we think all agencies should as well. So the first thing is the big shift. We've all been seeing this. This is not, going to be breaking news to anyone, but we've all been seeing the shift from TV viewership to YouTube and CTV. And eMarketer has this graphic that shows just how dramatic it is and how we're really seeing a crossover of more viewers on CTV and mobile video than we are on traditional TV, pay TV. What we haven't seen yet, as we all know, is this huge spending on TV still, and the CTV spending is growing quickly, but it's nowhere near the TV spending. And we think that's reasonable. That's the way it always works. I can age myself and say when mobile took over, we didn't see spending on mobile right away as fast as we did on traditional. And then, a few years later, we saw it cross over. And so the spending always lags a little bit behind the users, but the users are now, we all know this, we've all been watching a lot of Netflix and so forth during this crazy year. So this is just a reminder of the trend that we're all seeing. The challenge for us all, especially as an agency, is how do you find reach on connected TV when a lot of the connected TV viewership is on Netflix, which is not ad supported. We're not invited to the party, right? So out of the top 5 platforms in terms of reach on CTV, only YouTube and Hulu are ad supported. So none of us can put our clients on Prime or Disney or Netflix. So how do you leverage the big reach platforms of YouTube and Hulu, and then a smattering of these others in the gray category here to get reach? And I could do a whole presentation on that, but basically the main headline here is if you really are looking for reach, make sure you're trying to leverage at least one of the 2 big platforms of Hulu and YouTube. And a lot of people are surprised that YouTube is a leader in CTV, but it's if you eliminate all the subscription-based platforms, it's actually 43% of all viewership on CTV is on YouTube now. And then I wanted to share just a Pixability stat. We work with Google a lot and for the last 8 years, we work with them with their Super Bowl advertisers to analyze how things went. And this is a stat from last year. We don't have the stats from this year yet, but that really is sort of a metaphor for how viewership is changing and how we need to talk to advertisers about how this viewership is changing. So for those of us that have been watching the Super Bowl for years, we used to wait till Super Bowl day, and on game day, we'd see all the ads revealed. Now those ads are being revealed ahead of time, and YouTube is becoming the place where people go and watch these ads. You can see that there's more viewership of Super Bowl ads the day before and the day after the Super Bowl on YouTube than there is on game day. So this is just a change in behavior that's kind of, like I said, it's sort of indicative of the general theme we're seeing of, as advertisers and agencies and partners like us, we have to help our brands see this change and know that it's not the old way of doing things. And we'll talk a little bit more about Super Bowl ads later. So that big first theme we've all seen is the TV to CTV shift. The second big theme this year is a lot of us have thought a lot about brand safety, especially on social platforms like Facebook and platforms like YouTube. we've been seeing that this year it's going to be hopefully less focus on worry about whether our brands are running on scary stuff, and more focus on suitability, which is more about how can I connect my brands with content that they align with, that will drive performance. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So just to back up, this is just the kind of way to think about brand suitability on YouTube specifically. I'm not going to talk about brand suitability on CTV platforms right now, because it's less of a concern usually when we deal with advertisers. So if you think of this big gray box as all the content on YouTube, we all know that there's content on YouTube that we wouldn't want advertisers to be on. That's always going to be there to some extent. YouTube, however, has made huge efforts to get rid of the super scary, extremist content, hate content. And they have great sites that we can point you to that track this and track when they're taking down channels or videos based on, hate speech, et cetera. So they've done, relative to Facebook, they've done a very good job on this. They're still never going to be perfect. So this gray box is not where any of us want to be. The blue box here, YouTube ad eligible inventory, they've done a good job of setting apart. In order to serve ads on YouTube, you have to have a minimum number of subscribers and hours watched, at least 1,000 subscribers. So it's not like I can start a YouTube channel tomorrow and have hate speech and suddenly put, a Jeep ad on my channel. So that's one step. Beyond that, though, YouTube has created this YouTube measurement program that I mentioned, where it says, here are the 7 partners you should work with on the brand suitability stuff. And that's where the 7 companies that do this, including Pixability, these are the 2 general methods. There are lots of nuances to this, but basically we can either use exclusion technology, where we're excluding certain placements, channels, keywords, et cetera. Or we can use inclusion technology, which is we are going to run that company's ads on these specific channels. And you can look at the channels and you can make sure that they're fine. There are pros and cons to both. And we kind of, we gauge based on what the brand wants. If they want lots of targeting and lots of reach, we tend to recommend sort of using an exclusion approach. If they want, listen, I don't really care about using all kinds of different targeting and stuff, I just really want to make sure we're on the channels that we pick, then it's the inclusion list. So this is just a look at sort of how it's done right now. And then I like to we work very closely with GARM, with the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. And if you guys aren't familiar with them, you should check them out. So I told Rob that I was going to steal this phrase from him, because he describes brand safety and suitability as like water filtration. And I thought it was a really cool way to think of it, is when we get water from water sources, governments do the best they can to keep those water sources clean, and they try to protect reservoirs and so forth. But it's not going to be 100% clean. So it goes through all these different steps before it gets to our faucet. We should think of it the same way when we're thinking of YouTube content. YouTube has made all of these efforts, and they've made it as clean as they could possibly make it, but it's never going to be pure enough to drink, basically. And so there are all these steps where you can work with a partner, where they can first treat it, where they're actually sort of helping you map the YouTube landscape to see which channels and videos are suitable. And then there's the actual delivery of the campaign, where you're actually running on those suitable and contextually relevant channels and videos. And then there's the actual adjustments during the campaign. Now, this is a key thing that we tell people who are trying to run brand suitable campaigns themselves without partners, that it's fine to do it yourself, but there's some real landmines here that I'm going to show you on the next slide. And then the final thing here is working with measurement partners like a Double Verify to ensure that it ran on the brand suitable content you want. So this is the example that just happened a few weeks ago that I think is a great example of why it's a constant process and it's not a one and done thing. So if any of you are running YouTube campaigns and you're just saying, well, we're running on inclusion lists, we're not doing anything after that, this is a good example of why you have to be careful about that. So this was Amanda Ensing, who's a YouTube beauty influencer who has a very big reach and was the kind of person that was on a lot of inclusion lists for beauty campaigns, because this is the exact type of person that a beauty company would want to leverage to reach their audiences. A few weeks ago, it was actually 3 or 4 weeks ago now, after the Capitol riots in DC, she wrote some very pro the rioters texts, or tweets rather. And Sephora was sponsoring her video content, and folks that were against the Capitol riots started outraged. They were outraged about Sephora doing this, and they said, "How dare you sponsor this person who was, supporting the Capitol riots?" And they started this hashtag boycott Sephora. So Sephora said, "Oh my gosh, I wish we were more on top of this," and they pulled all their advertising from Amanda Ensing. And then, of course, all of the right-leaning fans used the boycott Sephora thing, saying, "How dare you, Sephora? You're anti-conservative, you're anti-right." And so it's a very sticky business. And this is something that our team caught the day that she did it and took her out of any lists that we were running, so that no advertisers would experience what Sephora experienced. Sephora is not a client of ours. So it's just something that we tell people, if you're trying to manage brand suitability yourself on YouTube, this is the kind of thing that you can bump into. So you either have to have people that are constantly monitoring this, or you should ask a partner to help you with that. All right, so third big trend that we're seeing is, I just talked about how important the context is. However, we also see advertisers fall into this trap of being pigeonholed into only doing contextual targeting and thinking, hey, if I have the right context, I'm all set. I don't have to worry about anything else. And what we tell people is there's sort of levels of what you should be worried about on YouTube. Obviously, the most important thing is it brand safe? And this is sort of becoming table stakes, that every YouTube campaign has to be brand safe, or it's just a no-go. In order to get brand suitability and contextual targeting is where you start to need to bring in partners to help you a lot of the time, unless you have a great in-house staff that can do what I was just explaining. And this is great, but if you only do these things in the top, these yellow things, you basically are handing a campaign back to, Jeep, where you're saying, hey, good news, Jeep, your campaign ran on all safe and suitable content. And they're like, great. Did it drive any purchases? Did it do anything else? We just spent millions, which, was our purpose just to be out there and be safe, or did we actually want to drive people to dealerships, et cetera? And so what we recommend is that people do all of these things above, but also there are great tools to drive audience engagement and business outcomes. And the easiest way to think about this is these are the three big buckets of targeting. There are lots of nuances to this that I could go into detail on, but you can do contextual targeting, where you're basically targeting where is this going to appear. You can do demographic targeting, and you can do behavioral targeting, where it's more about the audience themselves. What we're saying is a combination of these is what works the best. And sometimes we're finding that audience targeting just far outpaces contextual. Some combination is always the best, though. And this is just an example. If you're working with Jaguar, for example, you could do just contextual advertising for them, and they run on a bunch of content that was related to sports cars, as an example. However, if you layered in audience targeting, you could also say, we're going to be reaching people that actively search for a sports car on Google or YouTube. So the idea that you can do an ad on a television screen to someone that just searched for Jaguar that week is pretty cool. Custom affinity is all about, have they visited dealerships? Have they downloaded certain apps, visited sports car websites, et cetera? And then remarketing is, can you use anyone who's ever visited a Jaguar site or their competitors' sites or their channels, or anyone who's already in Jaguar's CRM list. So these are all super good tools that people leave on the table a lot of the time, because they say, we're contextually targeting, that's all you need for performance. And we found that it isn't. And I'll give you a really good live example. So this was a campaign that we helped Dallas Mavericks with, where we tried all kinds of different combinations of targeting. And they were trying to get people to download this new app that they had created. And what worked the best was custom affinity targeting, where we targeted people who had previously downloaded a long list of ticketing apps that we had plugged into the platform. So just a good example of where, if we had just done contextual targeting, we wouldn't have driven the output that we got from this type of targeting. All right, on to number 4. So Laura and I on the line here, we are not, we don't build creative for advertisers. So we're not creative experts. I saw that there are some great creative folks from agencies on the line here, but we have seen a lot of it. We've run more YouTube campaigns than anyone in the world except Google. So we've seen a lot of creative, and we have a lot of good metrics on what works. But we're not as good at visually what you should do. But one of the things that we've seen over the last few years is this trend towards longer creative on YouTube, and also this idea sort of cause-based creative, or speaking about what your brand stands for. This is especially true this year. So I'm going to give some examples of that. So this statistic, again, we do a lot of insights for brands. This was a statistic specific to organic video length, not ads specifically, but videos on YouTube that are of a certain length. And what it shows, and it was for a handful of really big brands, what it shows is that most of the videos that they have on their channels were in the 1 to 2 minute range. But as you got longer and longer, they had fewer videos in those buckets because they're harder to create, so it's understandable. But it drives much more engagement. And what we mean by engagement here is someone liked it or commented on it or shared it, which is ultimately what these brands want. They want engagement. They don't want to just put a video out there and have no one engage with it. We're also seeing it with ads. We actually did a study that showed that 30-second ads work better than 15-second ads on YouTube. There's so many. It depends when I say that. It depends on the creative. It depends on the market. It depends on who you're targeting, et cetera. But people have this concept that when I advertise on social, it has to be super quick and punchy, which is absolutely true on Facebook and Instagram and the platforms where people are not on there to watch video. They're on there to quickly engage and do other things. On YouTube, they're on YouTube to watch video. And we believe this is going to become very true with CTV platforms beyond YouTube as well. So keep this in mind, try some longer creative. This is an example that's a little bit old now, but I just love it. And I think you guys will like it too. If you haven't already seen it, this ABC wanted to promote their A Million Little Things show. And they actually ran a 43-minute ad on YouTube that had 80,000 views of the entire 43-minute episode that they had in the ad slot. So I'm not saying, hey, go run out and run 43-minute ads. Laura and I talked to our team, and they're like, please don't recommend to people that they run 43-minute ads. And we said, no, we're not recommending that. Don't worry. We're just pointing it out as a very creative way to show that don't be stuck in the sort of 15-minute mindset with YouTube. And this was amazing because they used ad sequencing, which is a really great tool on YouTube. And they gained also a lot of organic views to this episode. So just a really cool example that I like to throw out there. The other example I'll use is one from last week. So Budweiser, as most of you know, did not run a TV ad this year for the first time in 37 years. And they instead ran ads on YouTube. And their main ad on YouTube was a 1.5-minute ad. And it was much more of a cause-based ad. It was about getting vaccinated. And more brands are running ads that are more about what they stand for now than ever. One of the things Google also hires us to do is we track cause-based advertising every year, and we haven't come out with the results yet this year, but every year in the last handful of years, it's increased, where we've seen more and more cause-based advertising. It's still a small percentage of the ads that are out there, but it's increased every year, and they get the most engagement. They get way more engagement. We saw Panda Express, the fast food company, ran this ad that was all about Asian American heritage that got more engagement, triple the engagement of any of their ads that were just promoting going to their restaurant. So look for a lot more of this in 2021 as we're still in a, having a difficult year and hopefully on our way out of it. But brands are really, starting to stand up for what they believe. So for creative folks out there, definitely take a look at this, and we're happy to talk to you more about this. And finally, I think this is something I saw some questions on already. Don't think of video advertising as only views and reach. There are ways to drive things further down the funnel. Yes, it is a great tool for reach and views, and we suggest everyone use it as such. But almost every campaign we do, we measure brand or search lift, and YouTube has great tools for this that we leverage, that everyone should be leveraging. And it gives you a nice measurable way to say, your campaign was not only viewed, but it moved the needle. More importantly, we're helping a lot of brands drive visits to their website, visit to their stores. I have a good example of that on the next slide. And even revenue. For some of our really big advertisers, using YouTube on TV or YouTube on other devices, you can drive revenue and show how much of the revenue was online versus in-store revenue, and who was it from? Was it from men or women? Which creative work to do that? So there are really cool things you can do on YouTube. We work with YouTube folks weekly, and I can tell you that this year they're making a huge push into CTV and performance. And that's where all of their focus is. So look out for that this year, that YouTube knows that in the past, people used them more for just sort of awareness and visibility, and they more and more want to use them for driving lower funnel stuff. So look for that this year. It's going to be a big trend. And this is the example I spoke of. We work with a lot of QSR brands, and this brand that we worked with was able to spend money on YouTube, and doing the math, it only cost them 17 cents for every person they drove to one of their restaurants. So if you're this fast food joint and you know how much revenue you get per visit, and that revenue is anything more than 17 cents, which it was in this case, you know that it's cheaper for you to drive them on YouTube than the revenue is that you're going to get from them. So you're going to do this all day long. So it's really cool stuff that you can do. And this is a more recent example across all CTV platforms. So one of the big challenges still is, as we know, it's very hard to run across platforms and dedupe and do things like that. But you can do some apples to apples measurements in certain cases. And also you can drive lower funnel in some cases. YouTube is still the best at driving lower funnel on TV. But with Roku and Amazon, we just ran this campaign for Saucony, and they were obviously trying to get they were trying to get brand lift, which we measured on YouTube and Roku, and drove purchase consideration in both of those cases. With Amazon Fire, you can do some really cool things because you can run campaigns based on people's Amazon habits. So you can target people that had previously purchased Saucony or their competitors, or searched for them. And then you can track how many people in the campaign that saw the campaign then took the action and added these Saucony shoes to their cart. And this worked for Saucony. They saw people purchasing their shoes based on the YouTube campaign. So this is for any folks trying to manage the CTV plus YouTube thing. It is super challenging to understand frequencies and deduped reach. And that's just the biggest challenge in our industry right now. But there's some really cool things you can do to have side-by-side campaigns that show sort of apples to apples measurements. All right, so that was it. So I'm going to sum up real quick, and then Laura and I would love to take questions you have. So basically, as I said at the beginning, if you're running CTV campaigns and reach is important to you, know that YouTube and Hulu are the big places to get reach right now. You can get reach on that sort of other category, but it's like sort of like each one represents like 1% to 2% of viewership on CTV, so it's pretty small. Again, I mentioned the water filtration metaphor. Brand suitability is not a one and done effort. Don't just say, hey, all we're doing is we're measuring it with DV, and we feel comfortable with that. If you're not managing brand suitability throughout the process, you can run into trouble, as I pointed out. And again, I focus mostly on YouTube on that and a few other points, just because it's more of an issue. CTV, our advertisers on CTV are right now less concerned with brand suitability than they are on the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world. So that's why we focused on it. Third point, again, don't get pigeonholed into contextual only YouTube advertising. Don't think it has to be a car ad running on car content. It can be a car ad running on other content that aligns with the brand's morals, and also is in categories that we know that car shoppers want. And then you can find the audience within that contextual targeting. Fourth, try some longer creative. We're not saying do a 43-minute ad, and we're not saying only do long creative, but mix it up a little bit. Throw a 1-minute ad in there. We ran a campaign for a bank this past year where their top performing creative were 5-minute ads, and they were actually sort of cause related as well, by the way. And then finally, push for outcomes. We're not all in this business to just say, hey, we ran a campaign and it was safe, but it amounted to nothing. We're all in it because we want we want consumers to connect with the brands and to take some sort of action. So push for that, whether you're working with a partner or you're doing it yourself, push for that. And as James said, here's my email. Feel free to email me. We're going to answer questions now, but if there's anything we don't get to, you feel free to email me, and either me or Laura will get back to you. Also, I'm sure there'll be questions live that we get that may be things that we can't answer live, but we promise you we'll get back to you with answers if we can't answer them live. So from there, we will start to take questions.
Thanks, Matt. I'm